Welcome to this explainer on the ultimate universal genius. Look, we usually think of science and art as completely opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Like you're either a math person or a creative person. But for Leonardo da Vinci, they were the exact same thing. Today, we're diving deep into the interconnected mind of a single, absolutely extraordinary man.
But before we unpack his life, let's start with a really staggering figure. $450.3 million. That was the record-breaking auction price back in 2017 for his painting Salvator Mundi. That literally makes it the most expensive painting ever sold at a public auction.
Which brings us to a really fascinating puzzle. How does a boy born out of wedlock in a rural Tuscan hamlet, a kid who completely lacked any formal schooling in Latin or higher math, how does he grow up to change the world forever and create the most valuable art in human history? Okay, so here's our roadmap for this explainer to figure that out. We're going to trace his path in 4 steps. 1, the making of a genius. 2, the master painter. 3, science, anatomy, and invention. And 4, an unmatched legacy. Let's get right to it. We'll kick things off with part 1, the making of a genius. So Leonardo was born in 1452 to a lower-class woman and a legal notary. And because he was born out of wedlock, he was totally barred from the traditional, rigid educational paths of his time. But honestly, this was actually his greatest advantage. It's what allowed him to become the ultimate polymath, a true Renaissance man. We're talking about an individual with just this unquenchable curiosity, whose expertise spans a massive number of different subject areas. He just flat out refused to see any mutually exclusive polarities between the sciences and the arts. To him, they fed each other. And you can see how this builds when we look at the timeline of his life. His genius literally took him all across Europe. He apprenticed in Florence at Verrocchio's famous workshop in the 1460s. Then, by 1482, he's in Milan, pitching himself to the Duke, and get this, not just as an artist, but as a military weapons designer. He later moved to Rome and finally spent his twilight years living in France at the personal invitation of King Francis I. Moving right along to part 2, the master painter. Now, while today we totally revere his scientific mind, for about 400 years after his death, it was his painting that really cemented his legacy. And Leonardo had this notorious habit of leaving works unfinished. He was always getting distracted by new, unproven techniques. But when he actually finished a piece, wow. The results were absolutely staggering. Take The Last Supper, for instance. Painted in the 1490s, it captures the raw emotional shock of the exact split second Jesus says, "One of you will betray me." It went on to become the most reproduced religious painting of all time. So, an absolutely crucial point in his artistic evolution is a revolutionary technique called sfumato. It literally translates to Leonardo's smoke. Up until then, previous artists used these harsh, rigid outlines, but Leonardo, he blended his oils so incredibly smoothly that the brushstrokes just vanished into these subtle, smoky gradations of tone. It gave his subjects this eerie, almost breathtaking realism. And you can see this magic perfectly applied to his magnum opus, the Mona Lisa. Notice how he kept her dress unadorned to force your focus right onto her face, setting her against this dramatic, shifting landscape. But it's really that sfumato technique, those incredibly subtle shadows around the corners of her mouth and her eyes, that gives us that notoriously elusive, mysterious smile. Let's pivot to part 3, science, anatomy, and invention. Because here is the key takeaway about Leonardo. To him, a paintbrush and a scalpel were just different tools for the exact same purpose, which was understanding nature. And his mind was relentless. Think about this. An incredible 13,000 pages of his daily observations have survived in his notebooks. And remember, since he lacked formal schooling, his approach was purely observational. He famously recorded all of this in a bizarre, left-handed, mirror image cursive that you actually have to read right to left. These notebooks give us a direct window into his beautifully chaotic brilliance. I mean, on a single page, you might find mundane grocery lists, or even a list of people who owed him money, sitting right next to intricate designs for flying machines, detailed human dissections, or the complex laws of water dynamics. His mind was like a giant web, literally connecting everything he saw around him. He truly possessed a dual mind. On the canvas, he's achieving unmatched emotional mastery. Yet behind the scenes, He was making incredible, unpublished breakthroughs in human physiology. I'm not kidding, he was literally building glass models of the human aorta using water and grass seed just to observe blood flow. He actually became the first person in history to define atherosclerosis. So how did he do it? Topographic anatomy. By gaining permission to dissect human corpses down in hospital basements, he meticulously mapped out muscles, nerves, and bones, basically prefiguring the modern science of biomechanics. And here's why this matters to us. This obsessive scientific study of the human body directly created the unparalleled physical and emotional realism in his paintings. The science is what made the art possible. His engineering foresight was equally staggering, sitting literally centuries ahead of its time. He conceptualized these terrifying armored tanks and aerial screws that look exactly like modern-day helicopters. But he didn't just dream up futuristic weapons. He focused on the deeply practical, too. For instance, he discovered the fundamental laws of sliding friction back in 1493, which led to highly practical applications, like automated bobbin winders that quietly revolutionized local manufacturing. Finally, let's wrap up with Part 4, an unmatched legacy. By 1516, an older Leonardo had entered the service of King Francis I of France, living out his final years with a very generous royal pension. Now, despite failing health and actually suffering a stroke that paralyzed his right hand, his inventive spirit never faded. He kept his flair for pageantry. He even created this remarkable automaton for the king, a mechanical lion that could literally walk forward and open its chest to reveal a beautiful cluster of lilies. King Francis revered him deeply, and not just as a painter, but as a titan of thought. He famously declared, and I just love this quote, he said, "There had never been another man born in the world who knew as much as Leonardo. He was a very great philosopher." And the 16th century historian Giorgio Vasari totally echoed this awe, writing that Leonardo was endowed by heaven with infinite grace. But beyond the towering intellect, Vasari captured the deep gentleness of the man himself. He noted Leonardo's quirky, deeply empathetic habit of buying caged birds in the marketplace simply for the absolute joy of opening the doors and setting them free. Leonardo da Vinci passed away in 1519, leaving behind a legacy that still captivates us over 500 years later. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to ponder. If Leonardo's universal genius was unlocked by completely ignoring the boundaries between disciplines, well, what boundaries are limiting your own curiosity today? Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Keep learning, keep observing, and keep breaking down those boundaries.